Welcome, everyone. I would like to thank Book Passage for hosting the event because they are the venue that makes a home for authors, local authors in the community like me. So thank you so much. Also, yes. Thank you. Big thank you to Sylvia. I'm so happy to be here with you today to celebrate. And Ayya Santacitta, thank you. It's very special to have you. Thank you for being here. Where is Nancy? Oh, she's back there. Thank you, Nancy. You may notice my friend Nancy, who is recording this event so that I can share it with Venerable Dhammananda, who I call Long Mei, which means Venerable Mother, and in Thai. I wish you were here with us, Long Mei. This book is dedicated to you. And from all of us here today, we would like to acknowledge you for your courage, compassion, and wisdom. 3 deep bows, Sadhu. Okay, let's begin. I want to let you know a little bit about how today's event is organized. I'm going to begin with this short PowerPoint presentation because some of you may not know who Venerable is, Venerable Dhammananda. And I'll talk about how the book is organized, and Sylvia and I and Ayya will be talking in conversation for about 20 minutes. And if there's time, Sylvia will read a short passage, her favorite passage, and then we'll end with questions from the audience. Can you move it one forward? Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Great, that's better.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Jane. Okay, the book is organized in 3 parts. Her story, the first part of the book, is the story of Venerable Dhammananda's path to ordination. The second part, Heart to Heart Wisdom, is a series of engaging conversations I had with Venerable Dhammananda, and it was during the pandemic because I felt that people wanted to have contact and communication in a spiritual sense. And Venerable is such a beautiful teacher, and she's so accessible that it was a great program. We're not doing it quite as much now. But the conversations in the second part, the chapters in the second part of the book reflect some of the topics that we talked about: compassion, forgiveness, practicing meditation, dealing with loneliness, anxiety, things like that. Part 3 is called The Light of Our Beings, and it's about the ordained life. And that is reflections Venerable Dhammananda has on being ordained for 20 years, and also my reflections on having received temporary ordination twice. Oh, you're on to the next slide. That's all right. One of the first things Venerable said to me was, everything begins in our hearts. And this is a great picture. This is probably about 2006. I'll talk a little more later about how we ended up in Thailand. She told me everything begins in our hearts, and I love this saying. In our 20 years together, she has taught me everything I know about compassion and forgiveness. She said, when I feel compassion, my heart softens. And when my heart is soft, I am truly open to my shared connections with others. Next slide. So this is Venerable Dhammananda. She is Thailand's first fully ordained nun. She had to go to Sri Lanka to be ordained because Thailand, to this day, historically, since 1928 to now, does not permit monks to ordain women. She received novice ordination in 2001 and higher ordination, which is the word Bhikkhuni, in 2003. In order to understand the significance of what a courageous act this was, I need to give a brief introduction on women's ordination in Thailand. The Buddha, you may not know, ordained women in his lifetime. This was revolutionary because he lived in 6th century India, BCE, with the Brahmanical caste system. Women were considered impure and a hindrance to spiritual growth. Venerable calls the Buddha the first feminist because he was the first one in world religions to say that men and women are equal spiritually, have equal spiritual potential, and that women can be ordained. The Buddha's golden phrase was, they can see it with their own eyes. Next slide, please. So before the Buddha passed away, he called for the creation of the fourfold Buddhist community. That is lay men, lay women, fully ordained men or male monks, and fully ordained women, Bhikkhuni. And we need these four pillars of support in order for Buddhism to survive and continue in the future. Now, this is kind of amazing. During Thailand's 700-year history plus as a nation, before Dhammananda, there had never been a lineage of fully ordained women. Just to put in the Theravada tradition. Just to put this in perspective, at the time Dhammananda received novice ordination in 2001, there were approximately 300,000 male monks, and she was the lone Theravada woman, the lone Theravada nun. She uses a chair as a metaphor, the metaphor of a chair to describe the situation. You could say, in my country, one leg of the chair, the fully ordained nuns, is missing. I needed to bring back the fourth leg. So she has dedicated her life to restoring women's their rightful place in Buddhism, not just in Thailand, by the way, throughout Asia. And Venerable Dhammananda saw it as her responsibility to establish this missing heritage that the Buddha had granted women. Next slide, please. So here is Venerable Voramai, Dhammananda's mother. And you see Venerable, when she's a lay person, her name was Chatsumarn Kabil Singh. And Ayya is going to say a little bit about Venerable Voramai. She actually met her. I never met her. She had passed away before I met Venerable Dhammananda. She was a remarkable woman. She took ordination, full ordination, in the Chinese or Mahayana tradition. According to Venerable Dhammananda, because she ordained in Mahayana and not Theravada, which is the Thai tradition, the Thai public did not recognize her ordained status. She was a remarkable feminist. She did jujitsu in 1932. She wrote 29 days with the Boy Scouts, the Thai Boy Scouts, from Bangkok to Singapore. I mean, she was just remarkable. There's a lot more she did, but anyway, that was when she was young. Now, looking at Dhammananda, you can see how dressed up she is. And at the time, she was a successful TV personality, as been mentioned, a popular host of a TV Dharma show, an internationally recognized Buddhist scholar, a feminist, an environmental activist, a wife, and she had been married for 30 years and had 3 sons. She often tells the story of how she came to the decision to be ordained. She was looking at her reflection in the mirror, looking like this before she went on her TV show. And she heard a voice in English, mind you, say, "How long do I have to do this?" And she said to me, "You should have seen me dressed up in matching outfits, perfectly manicured nails. I wore lots of jewelry and makeup." And she'll laugh about this. At the time, I was desperately lonely and wanted to do something more meaningful with my life. So here we see she's receiving a seminary or novice ordination in 2001 in Sri Lanka. At the time, she was 57 years old, had taught for 27 years as a professor of Buddhist studies at Thammasat University. She had divorced her husband by this point, given up her teaching career, family, wealth, and fame to be ordained. That is why she is quoted as saying, "You leave at the point you are most successful." That is renunciation. When Dhammananda returned to Thailand after her novice ordination in Sri Lanka, she hoped things would remain quiet. She wanted them to remain quiet, but that was not the case. There was a huge uproar in the press. The press dubbed her the rebel monk. She did not care for that name. She said, "I was never really a rebel. I simply followed my faith. I had full faith in the Buddha." But at any rate, she was dubbed the rebel monk and personally attacked. She was so hurt she didn't read the newspaper for 2 years. I once asked her if she thought she was brave, and she said, "Actually, I have no bravery. All I have is strong faith in the Buddha. I have traversed the globe so that my grandchildren will be proud of their grandmother who cleared the path for them to walk proudly as Buddhist women." So Venerable Dhammananda has succeeded in her vision, I guess you might say, to establish the female lineage of ordained nuns in Thailand. On the left, there are more than 285 Bhikkhunis in Thailand now. Remember, she started with one and spread out in at least 30 of the country's 77 provinces. The women you see on the left are receiving temporary novice ordination. Novice ordination is the first step in becoming a fully ordained nun. There's a tradition in Thailand where male young men, adolescents, took temporary ordination for maybe 3 months. And what Venerable thought was, well, I would like women to have that opportunity. So she developed her own practice, or her own style of it. It's a 2-week ordination process. And it's a good way for some women to find out if the monastic life suits them. And some go on and become Bhikkhuni. And she has ordained more than 1,000 women now since 2009. The picture of me on the right is taken in December 2022 when I was ordained for the second time. I'm not sure what that is, sorry. Okay, it was a life-changing experience, which I write about in the third part of the book. And this is the last, next slide, thank you. You're doing great, Penny, thank you. Okay, Bhikkhuni Dhammananda Mahateri. Mahateri means great one or most venerated one. It's an honorific term in Pali for those who have been ordained for at least 20 years. In the afterword to this book, This Fresh Existence, Bhikkhuni Dhammananda says, a society in which women have been suppressed for so long is not easily changed. As Buddhists, it is our responsibility to fight against injustice. We must remove this wall of illusion, this wall of patriarchy, hierarchy, and inequity to see the truth of the Buddha's teaching. Whether the oppression is political, social, religious, whatever, we have to think hard about it together, not separately. The extent to which we can think collectively and commit together is the extent to which we can bring about social change. Thank you.
There's something so uplifting about religious fervor, you know, about really the experience, whether it's yours or somebody else's, of feeling a call, saying, I need to do this, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was growing up, people said about choosing a religious vocation. They said, I heard a call, I felt a call, I knew I had to do that. When I asked Ayya Santacitta right away about her background, I'm the only one of us who was never ordained, although I began my Buddhist studies in 1977. On July 7th, 1977. So it's a 7777, which I think was an auspicious number. And I was thinking I was going to come and say I knew the Venerable Dhammananda be the first of all of us, but it turns out I don't, that Ayya is ahead of me and probably met her. But what I want to say just to begin with is I want to say about myself, I never became ordained, but in the first years of my practice, when I was very seriously going to a lot of retreats and spending a lot of time in monastic kinds of situations, I was so inspired, not thinking I should be a nun and I could live quietly. I liked being on retreat and I liked the quietness, but I'm all right with the not quietness. I was really, what I wanted was a kind of mind that was at ease and feeling peaceful that I often felt in that kind of a situation. So I remember having the thought one day in the middle of a long retreat, I have to become a nun. And it was such an outrageous thought because I was 45 years old. I had 4 teenage children. I had a long-term marriage. I'm a Jew. They don't remain celibate. They don't get ordained in anything, God forbid. So, but I had the thought, and it was so outrageous to myself. So in one moment, I had the wonderful feeling of, that's what I want to do. And the next feeling, no, I can't do that. And the next feeling of, all right, I'm going to have to be an invisible nun. I'm going to have myself dedicated to, I loved in your book when you said the first thing I took bodhisattva vows. I have to do all my vows secretly, and no one will know. But it's not about for me and for all of us who are not so likely to take vows in this lifetime, to be able to say, "But I am vowed to live in a peaceful and with a peaceful and loving heart, doing my part, since I'd like to have a peaceful and loving heart as my contribution to the world." But I would like for Ayya to say, when did you have the call? Or you knew the Venerable Dhammananda before me. I thought I held a record for that.
No, you don't. The call, it was very different in my case, because people have often quite romantic, ideas. Actually, I'm Austrian, so my English is maybe a little bit hard to understand. So in my case, it wasn't like that. I stumbled into the monastery of my first teacher by a series of coincidences, and I was just very impressed by his presence, and then I thought, I'd like to train, as a novice nun maybe for 2 years or so and sort myself out, and then I'm gonna come back, finish my degree and continue with my career. But for some reason or another, I never left again the monastery. So it started very differently. I didn't feel like a lifelong calling. And I had again and again, I had my doubts about it being the right thing, because traditional monasticism is pretty conservative in some ways, and there were some hopes, that the changes would go into the system much quicker than it actually worked in real time. So it wasn't that simple, like a calling and then you're just done. But in the beginning, it's like a falling in love, with a possibility. And then, like when you're falling in love, with your partner, and then you have the honeymoon phase, and then it becomes the kitchen sink phase. And the monastery is exactly the same thing, And there's lots of it's a lot of letting go of ideas and projections and dreams. And somehow, if you can handle that and nothing else happens, then you're going to be a nun still after 30 years. I'm now a nun since 93. But it's not, because I think that's the only way to live. It's just one way. And it works for me. And I'm not surprised it doesn't work for many people, because it is an odd way to live your life. But if it works for your makeup, it can be really very supportive.
I would like to say how I met Venerable.
Please.
Yes. Well, I have my former husband, Randall, who's here, and my son, Chris, and his beautiful partner, Elise. And we moved to Thailand in 2005 as a result of his job. And I was looking for something to do. And during that time, I went to a conference, and it was Aid to Women in Development. And I attended an afternoon workshop called Faith, Feminism, and the Power of Love. And I love that title because I never heard faith and feminism in the same sentence. And so what happened was, to be quite honest, I didn't go to Thailand looking for a spiritual teacher. It just happened. And there's a saying that when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and that's what happened to me. It did come quite organically. In fact, I think first we were supposed to go to Argentina, and when we moved to Thailand, I was like, I'm not sure what I'm going to do here. But could you pass me the water that's on the side there? Thank you.
Much in there, but maybe somebody gets you more.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, there's some there.
Thank you.
I do get a little dry mouth when I get nervous. Thank you. So basically, so basically what happened in the workshop was there's a bit of an altercation. There was women from all over the world on this panel, from Africa, from Indonesia, from Central America. And they were basically having a discussion about how faith and feminism kind of intersected. And the couple of the Muslim participants became, they were just on opposite sides of the fence, let's say. One really supported Islam and the other felt that Islam was kind of a keeping women back, essentially. Anyway, there was a silence, a hush fell over the room, and Venerable came into that silence and said, we cannot solve anything with anger. Anger doesn't lead us anywhere. It is much harder to practice compassion and loving kindness. That is the goal of Buddhism. So it's kind of like an electric bolt went through me, and it wasn't a conscious recognition, I don't think, but looking back on it, that was the moment that I decided she can teach me something. I was struggling with depression and anger all my life, and a lot of people do. And I felt this woman, her presence she was very quiet, but also very strong. And what impressed me about her is, as a woman, she showed strength through vulnerability. And what Joan Halifax described her as having a strong back and a soft front. And she made an impression on me as a very powerful social role model for change, as a Buddhist first and a feminist, but not through anger, through loving kindness and compassion. So that was kind of the path that I took. And that was the beginning. We had 3 years in Thailand. I did go to, thank you, Chris. That's my son, thank you. It was, yes, thank you. It was a wonderful experience, but I would go down frequently to the temple. I would go on alms round, which is very traditional for Thai or Asian countries, I should say, certain Asian countries. Went to, I forgive me if I said this, we did go to Nepal and Indonesia together. We traveled together. And at some point I decided, this woman is so incredible. I'm so impressed by her that I need to tell the story of her life. I wanted to write the book since 2007. So this is a huge, momentous occasion for me. Thank you for being here, because it took me that long to write it. Thank you.
I was thinking though, as we were just talking about microphone. Whoops, sorry, I'm holding it in my hand, but over there.
Oh, that's better.
I met her in just at the very end of the 1990s. And I met her because I was a delegate. I had been invited to a conference called an International Interfaith Women's Conference, organized by Dorothy Eck, who was at that time the head of the religion department at Harvard. And there were Buddhists and Hindus and Sikhs and Christian Protestants and Catholics and Jews. There were a lot of, and there was no audience. It was just 66 people representing all different religions sitting around an enormous table. Well, lots of long tables made into a square, and we were all sitting around the periphery of it. And there were 3 Buddhists, and one of them was Chatsumar Kabul Singh. One of them was Judith Simmer Brown, who was a dean at Naropa at the time, and me. So talk about feeling a little bit humble. But we had a very nice week, and I loved it. This is a story that nobody knows because it's not that sort of a story. When I arrived in Toronto, where it was, I came from Europe, where I had been traveling with my husband, and I went to the organizers and I said a box should have arrived for me, because before we went to Europe, we went together, and then he flew home with our bicycles, and we'd been bicycling in France for 3 weeks. He flew home with a bicycle and all those clothing, and the box with my clothing for this week-long winter women's conference didn't arrive. I checked on it the moment I arrived. They said, no, we don't have it. The whole week of the conference, I checked every day. The box did not arrive. The last day of the conference, they said, we located the box. It got stuck in customs. It didn't go through the Canadian customs. Do you want us to bring it over? I said, no, send it back home. Meantime, I had the dress that I was traveling in, the underwear that I had on. Fortunately, a toothbrush in my, as a really like monk, you know, nothing but a toothbrush. And I washed, well, this is TMI, but I washed my underwear every night, of course, and I wore the same dress. And Dhammananda gave me a dress to wear one day.
Oh.
And I looked on, I have a photo of us, and she's wearing regular clothes because it was free ordination, and I am wearing her dress. And I gave it back to her. Of course, it'd be wonderful to have it still, but she's about my size.
And she's actually 5'8".
Yeah, actually,
Yeah. Yeah.
not my size.
Must have been a short dress.
It was a short dress, but I remember
It was midi on you.
I remember her saying that now I am married, I'm a professor at the University of Thailand. I have 3 sons that I am raising up. And someday I'm going to retire from this job, and my sons will be grown, and I'll get a divorce, and I'm going to become a nun. And so I knew her way back from then, and she did. We had some emails, but I guess we were already in the 2000s. We had emails, but and then I saw her when she came back to Spirit Rock. She's been back a couple of times since then, and she remembers me. I remember her, but I remember that she gave me her dress. The best thing about that story is she was saying all the groups were very nice to each other, very congenial, different groups talking about their religion. And she said, I heard from some of the women here, backstories, that they're grumbling about you and Judith being here, that you weren't real Buddhists, essentially because we're not Asian, which is a false view of Buddhists anyway. But that you, both of you are not really Asian, so that you're not real Buddhists. And she said, I have been telling them back that you and Judith are real Buddhists. And I felt so good about that she was championing that cause. So those are the stories that I remember from them. And then she said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be a nun. So she did.
Right. And when you're in her presence, part of the kindness that you experienced, it's extraordinary because she is 100% present. She's very advanced spiritually through her meditation practice. And I do remember one time in particular, she gave me a lesson on not grasping and clinging. And it's kind of an interesting story. It's in the book. But my first book, Finding Venerable Mother, I really wanted her to like it. I was there in 2020, right before the pandemic broke out. And we spent some time there, and I thought, I was anxious. I wanted to see how she reacted to the book. And she, first of all, as a Thai woman, she's not typically Asian because she will give you direct feedback, honest feedback, and that's not typical. They will not confront, get angry in public because they don't want to make other people lose face, as they call it. In this case, she was straight on with me. She said, you say, my venerable mother, my teacher. And it was a real lesson on, she was telling me, this is too much possessiveness. And it kind of shocked me. I was very disheartened by her feedback at the time. But she also gave a Dharma lecture that night. And I started to, it's just 1 second. What happens to me a few times when I'm in her presence is she will transmit to me and I will experience physically the energy coming towards me of her teaching. She'll be saying something. She said, now she told a particular Dharma story. I told this story for you. And I got chills. And then I remember this feeling of getting like tingling energy through my head, down my body, through my heart. And I even heard a voice say, I remember thinking, she's transmitting, I'm receiving her transmission. And I am the catalyst, the person who will write her book and bring her stories about loving kindness and compassion to the world. And that's kind of how this book got born. I think it's important to say because she is so inspiring. Thank you, Lung Mei. You are so inspiring as a woman aspiring to bring about a better world, a world where women are respected, a world where compassion and loving kindness has a place, and there's so much anger and discord in our societies now. That is why I feel her message is important, and that is why I want her voice to be heard. Thank you.
I think maybe I could say something. Oops, again.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I could let you know when I met her for the first time. That was, I think, in 1996 in Thailand, when Dhammananda was still a laywoman and an anchor person for TV shows and university professor, and visited. Her mother was still alive at that time, so I visited the monastery. It's in Nakhon Pathom. That's about 2 hours south of Bangkok, and I wanted to pay my respects to her mother, and she was there, and she kind of facilitated all of it. And then her son took me to the bus station and so on. And then 4 years later, I met her again. She came to England, where I was training in a monastery called Amaravati. It's about an hour north of London, international monastery. And I had my high ordination there as a Siladhara. And when Kabir Singh, at this time, she was still a laywoman. She came with a Thai TV crew to film the ordination ceremony. And she interviewed me afterwards. I don't remember any of the words, but that's how I met her twice. And then the last time I met her was 2013 in her monastery back again in Nakhon Pathom. And I was a bhikkhuni then, and she was a bhikkhuni. And I stayed for a week at the monastery and was just part of the daily routine, and went on alms round and did all kinds of things. And I remember, that I think it's really very impressive what she was able to materialize, for women. And she was also lucky that she had, her mother already had founded that monastery, so she could, take all of that over. But the courage she had, to be challenging the establishment in that way in Thailand, this is pretty impressive. And just, for you to know, in May next month, there will be a 3-part series, online series at Spirit Rock, where I'm gonna be in conversation with Venerable Dhammananda live online. And if you're interested, Cindy has put out some flyers, on the table. It's 3 Wednesdays in May, in the evening from 7 to 8:30 Pacific time. And yeah, I think she has shown a lot of courage and also, diplomacy and creativity and so on to get through the maze of the system, and survive, because it's still today not easy, for fully ordained nuns. And I'm also one of those, to find our place, because we're still not completely recognized, by the hierarchy. And even, the Buddha has given this form of ordination in Iron Age India 2,600 years ago, but the Theravada lineage, experienced an interruption of that ordination for 1,000 years. And since the 80s, it's coming back. And Venerable Dhammananda is one of the people, in Asia who have made a big difference. And yes, there's quite a lot of bhikkhunis here in California, and I'm one of those.
I think I'm going to finish, if that's all right with you. Yeah, with what is the wisest thing Venerable Dhammananda ever said to me? As I think it gives you a sense of how she is. And it was way back in 2016, and I listened to the she had so much patience with me. Every time I came, she said, "So what are your questions?" First of all, she's a born teacher. She loves students. She's very charismatic. And I encourage you, if you're interested in hearing her live, to sign up for the class at Spirit Rock. But I was struggling with depression at the time. And I said, my mind is so dark. And she said to me, blocked, you cannot see. And so much, this is her words, so much story deep down in there must come out. When you look at the experience with Buddha's mind, when your mind is anchored, you can see clearly and you can let go. Oh, you say, I see you. I don't need you anymore. And you let go. She was continuously giving me hope and joy and the ability to see things in a new perspective. And every time I came back from the temple, I felt like I experienced a new way of seeing and being. And I still feel that way when I'm with her. And I think to be at the temple is sort of like being at home for me. It's like coming to a place of refuge and sanctuary. And yeah, anyone can go. Anyone can receive temporary ordination. It's given twice a year. So if you're inclined that way, I would say consider it. Thank you
And
so
also
much.
people can go there without ordaining. They can
Absolutely.
just stay
Thank you. Yeah.
I was thinking one of the things we should just underline is when I'm with her on those occasions, she never seems rushed.
Yes.
She comes across in the book as well as being so patient. This didn't happen. So I said to myself, well, it's not happening yet. You know, that not it won't happen. It's not happening yet. So the sense I get from her is that the awareness of if it's not happening, to agitate my mind further by being in conflict with that, just to say it's not happening yet. Okay, without agitating the mind. I have felt on the different times when she was here the last time and I met her at Spirit Rock.
Oh yeah.
That she's not in a hurry.
No. No, she's 200% present if that's possible. And a big teaching of hers is letting go of I, me, my, mine, which essentially is ego. And she says, because clinging to oneself causes suffering. And when she is with you, she has an uncanny sense to speak to you, your individuality, your person. She would always tell me things I needed to hear, and I always wondered about that. But then when she was with my other friends, sometimes some of you were on casual Buddhism, she would speak to, I remember Tanya, she said, you need to take care of yourself. And that's what Tanya needed to hear. So very present, very aware. And I think it might be good to turn to the audience for questions at this point, if you would. I'm not sure a book passage can facilitate that for us.
No, if people ask, you can say it back.
Okay, great.
There's somebody over there.
Have the remote mic.
Okay.
Here's a question.
Adrian, yes.
Thank you so much. That was really beautiful. And I have a observation or reflection and a little bit of a question. I love you were talking about everyone's talking about whether you get a calling or not, and it's so clear that your calling has been to share this story and to write this book.
Yes, thank you.
And who knows what the next steps will be, but you are following your calling, and it's just beautiful to know that.
Oh, thank you.
Story.
Thank you.
Nice. And I'm interested in hearing, maybe other people are too, a little bit more about your experience being with her, because it's so clear that it's not just about the words in the teachings. You can hear the words, you can read the books, you know, but you experience something very profound with her from the very beginning. It's much more embodied than that. So if you had anything else to say about that.
Sure. I think we have a special connection. And I do remember one time, 2014, I was receiving temporary ordination. And I'll tell the story because I think it shows the impact she's had on me. They were playing a song in Thai about a mother's love. And there was 122 Thai women, and I was the only Farang, which means foreigner. And So I didn't know what the words meant. So I was just blindly walking along down the path. We were moving towards her to give her sorry, I can't remember what the lotus leaves. Yeah, lotus flowers. And all of a sudden, when I approached her, I went down, of course, on my knees, and it was like a flood came through. It was like I was so overwhelmed with gratitude and a sense of understanding what she meant by forgiveness. I don't know if this is answering your question, but it's a real profound opening. And the first time I was with her, and I write about it in Finding Venerable Mother, in 2005, I guess that was, we were walking in the back garden, and I just started to cry because that's the effect she has on me and on other people. I've seen other women or men also just burst out crying. And she just quietly said, well, when that's okay. A lot of people cry when they first come here because the heart softens and the defenses fall away. Your heart opens. And I guess it's hard to describe in a physical sense, but when I am with her, that is how she impacts me. She opens I feel more open. I think it's her trust. I think it's her essence as a person and the level of her practice that she calls that forth from people. And I know other people have that experience too. So thank you for asking that question. Mm-hmm.
I have a Roman knight here. Who's next?
So could you talk a little bit more about the research you did for this book? How I know that when you started this, there was much not there, and much has been put into the book since. And you want.
Well, a lot of the I had to study to learn about the women's ordination process in Thailand because it's a complicated process. As I mentioned, the lineage died out in, I think it was the 10th century in Sri Lanka. And of course, when you're with her, she always, I have to say this because it's kind of funny. I saw Sharon Sa the other day. She's the head of Sakyadhita, the women's Buddhist organization. And she said, you know, I have to admit, I'm kind of a bad Buddhist. And I realized that there was so much in the Vinaya, the monastic ritual, and the research that Venerable did on the is it the Patimokkha?
Patimokkha.
Patimokkha, yes. She's very serious about making sure that women follow the monastic rules and live up to their responsibility to harbor, to help the people maintain their faith. That's the, I'm not saying this very well, but anyway, I had to do a lot of research to catch up, to understand what the process of female ordination is, what they go through, what the history was, which is quite interesting. It kind of went from India. Maybe you know this more. Can you say a little bit about that?
From India to Sri Lanka, and then from Sri Lanka to China, and and all other Asian countries. And then it came also here to the West in the 80s, 1980s. Yeah. And also, there isn't like one interpretation of the Patimokkha. There's also different interpretation, different lineages, different schools of Buddhism. So it's not at all black and white. There's a lot of gray, So, and in the beginning, one always thinks, when you are entering the monastic path, you have like a very clear black and white path. But the longer you're in it, it's just like any other, science or whatever. There's a lot of different opinions and ways of looking at it. But the Theravada form is like the oldest of the three forms which are available, and is kind of the root of the monastic how do we call it? The monastic training. Yeah.
Training.
Yeah.
Anybody else? So, yes.
Hi, Cindy.
Hi, Wendy.
I just want to thank you
for bringing Dhammananda into my life personally.
Mhm.
And also into everybody's life. She is a remarkable human being. And I've had the privilege of listening to her and being with her on the screen, on Zoom. That's it, not even in person. And every single time something happens, my heart just opens. And it happened the first time. I thought, well, you know, yeah, it happened. And then I got to be on Casual Buddhism and actually have a conversation with her and you twice, which was incredible. And both times I had that sensation, which that's not a common sensation. Just to feel my whole heart opening. Yeah. So again, I thank you so much for doing this. And like somebody already said, you know, your calling is to share her and her teachings and her incredible presence, even if you don't actually get to be there in person. It comes across.
Oh, thank you so much, Wendy.
Cindy.
Hi, Sally.
So my question has to do with the courage that Dhammananda has brought to her life and her teaching and all of us. Roshi Joan Halifax wrote, I thought, a very powerful foreword to your book. And she really drew a picture of how Dhammananda, the contrast between her book, her life before she was ordained, where she was widely known as a journalist, a TV journalist. She was beautiful. And then when she was ordained, I understood from the foreword that she was, I don't know exactly, I can't remember the word, like despised or, you know, disrespected in ways that she, I imagine, did not experience before that. So I'm wondering if those of you that knew her in the years before and then after her ordination, if you could speak a little bit about what she experienced as, you know, disrespect or, you know, something that would, if it were me, I would have to walk very, very heavily through that type of thing.
I probably should answer this because she spoke to me often about that time. Back in 1983, and I thought this was the conference you were at, but I don't think it was. Diane Eck at Harvard Divinity School. Were you? I thought you were there, right?
I was there. I didn't know it was 83. That's long
That's
ago.
it. Well, that was when Venerable became a feminist. She wasn't Venerable then; she was a layperson. But yeah, well, she had never heard about Western feminism. And she became very excited about it, but she also realized that she didn't want to be angry like Western feminists, if I can put it bluntly. And she wanted to, she wanted the grounding of her spiritual teaching, because she said a lot of people suffer who are social activists and they go through a lot. And she wanted that's why she says, I am a Buddhist first and a feminist second. But what I was trying to say about that time is she suffered enormously. She pulled back. She learned to be more cautious with the media, which played her off a lot in Thailand. But she never lost faith in the Buddha. And the strength of her faith in Buddhism and her belief in the teachings is what carried her through that. Is that answering your question, Sally, or what is there anything more you would like?
The meeting of being a woman. I mean, this I think so much of the story of Dhammananda. She wasn't a man, she was a woman in male-dominated situation.
Mhm.
And she met what, many of us have met in our lives with, you're describing it, she met that with compassion
Yes.
and forgiveness
Mhm.
as opposed to anger.
Mhm.
I think that's really instructive. And I'm looking forward to learning more because that's very powerful in this day and age.
I would have said so the compassion and the forbearance, I think, are a reflection of her wisdom,
Mhm.
that it's not happening now.
Mhm.
And if I add rage or indignation to it, I make it worse. I think that she genuinely understood that anger is not ended by anger, but let alone is anger ended. But really, it's through her wisdom. I
Yeah.
thought that's what your book conveys as well.
Oh, thank you. She said it better. I think it's about 2. So would you, I think we can stop here unless there's one more burning question.
Oh, that's just a little pressure on somebody.
Yeah. Unburning.
Is there, I don't want to close. I thought there was someone in the back. No? We're good? Well, this has been wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
All 3 of you. It's very lovely and inspiring. Please let's give them a nice round of applause.